Hi again, it's Ryan Miller with Etna Interactive, and we're going to take just a couple of minutes today to talk a little bit about Canada's new anti-spam law called CASL in short. Now, before we dive in, I think one of the questions I can anticipate is, if I'm a practice in the U.S. or somewhere outside of Canada, do I need to worry about CASL? And the short answer is yes, because here's a quote from CASL that CASL applies where a computer system located in Canada is used to either send or access an electronic message. So you read that right, send or access. So if you are sending commercial electronic messaging and it could be received by a Canadian citizen, a Canadian resident, then yes, CASL applies to you. Now, CASL is very, very different than, say, the US's CAN-SPAM laws, where the CAN-SPAM laws were focusing on a clear path for users to exit, to be removed from lists. CASL really is focusing on how people end up on marketing lists in the first place. And unlike the US CAN-SPAM laws, CASL is very toothy. There's a lot of potential penalties in CASL. As we saw in that last screen with all those bills, there's potentially up to $10 million in liability for businesses that aren't behaving appropriately with their electronic messaging. So ultimately, it affects really any business that's sending out what are called commercial electronic messages. Now these are, I think, broadly interpreted to include email marketing, SMS messages, and some social media. But keep in mind for today, we're going to focus in pretty exclusively on the email marketing component of this. The goal ultimately of CASL, it's not meant to punish business. It's really meant to reduce the harmful effects of spam, ideally making businesses that are using making email even more effective for them. At the same time, we do acknowledge this is the most aggressive spam legislation that we've seen really anywhere in the world, and there's a lot of speculation that we're going to see similar laws begin to emerge in other countries as well. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, there is a maximum of a $10 million fine for businesses, and this is, I think, a good reason to take this seriously. Now, as we go kind of into the next step, what I want to do is break it down and talk about really the three key pillars of CASL, the things that we need to think about. Now, the good news is for medical practices in general is that most of you are behaving properly, you're respecting patient privacy because of laws in the US like HIPAA and PIPEDA in Canada, where many of you are already engaged in the things you would need to do to satisfy CASL. But there's a few things that we might want to dive into in a bit more detail. Keep in mind, we're not giving legal advice here. I just want to share with you some known best practices. So the three ideas here are consent, identification, and unsubscription. So according to CASL specifically, they want to see businesses obtaining implied or express consent. Now here at Etna, we're conservative. We like to see that practices are protected. And so we're really aiming for the express intent piece. Now, what that means, what it is that you're going to be looking for in terms of CASL, is you want to confirm first that your subscription method satisfies that definition of intent, of consent. In the case of implied consent, that you have done business with that particular person before and they would be expecting some kind of commercial messaging from you, but I think more appropriate for the medical arena, that they've expressly given you intent. They've given you permission to send them a specific kind of commercial messaging. We want to be sure that you are keeping records about exactly how you obtain the consent. Now, for our clients for whom we manage your lists, we timestamp and record that permission was received for things like newsletter list subscriptions. But if you're collecting email addresses inside your office, CASL puts the onus, the responsibility back on you in your office to prove how and when you got that permission from that patient or prospect to send them electronic messaging. So you never ever want to presume consent. We're really looking at true opt-in measures here, and ideally a best practice is what's called confirmed opt-in, when somebody not only puts their name on their list, but then also will confirm it by clicking a link that's in an email confirmation to verify that they in fact were the same person who put their name on your list. The next thing really is about identification, and there's the expectation that both on your subscription form and in your actual commercial messaging, you will clearly identify your business name, your contact information and address, as well as contact details like a telephone number that ultimately can be used to reach out to you and your business. So surrounding all of those forms and those messages themselves with the requisite information is very important as a next step. The third pillar in CASL is about making unsubscription easy. For most clinics, this is something, as long as you're not sending out commercial messages through a desktop email program, any one of the commercial solutions for email marketing automatically includes those links for people to unsubscribe. But with CASL, you do ultimately want to give multiple paths for people to have that unsubscription provided. Not just with the unsubscription link, but through that clear identification, so that if they email you or call you, that you are committed to processing those subscription requests in a timely and professional manner. Now, the big things here is I just want to stress the fact that there is liability around CASL. There's some time. They've given a 3-year period of which, looking backwards, that you could bring your old list into compliance. But right away, for those of you that are in Canada, you do need to be following those new CASL best practices for managing your subscription list. So what would the checklist look like if you wanted to make sure things were looking good relative to your compliance with CASL? Well, here are a couple of things that you should consider doing. The first of those things really is about ensuring that all of the forms, all of the mechanisms that you use to collect permission for that commercial electronic message list, that all of those things have been checked to make sure they satisfy the express consent requirement. These might be the forms that are used that are paper forms inside your office. It might be the way that you collect data in emails, and it's especially going to be the forms on your website that are linked to your email subscription systems. You want to make sure that you identify yourself. So on the pages of your site, on the policies of your site where you're describing how and where people can be added to your subscription list, you want your full business name, address, and phone number to appear. Additionally, that should be on all of the messages that go out. It's also important that you describe the intent, that you describe what it is when someone's subscribing that they can expect to receive from you. And then finally, we want to make sure that you, not quite finally, I have just a few more points, that you verify that you document how and when that consent is being obtained. So do a little audit of your systems, do an audit of especially those paper-based subscription forms that you're using inside your office to make sure that you're keeping records of when and how permission was received. You do want to consider reaffirming consent with your older list. Now, this is especially important for any practice that may have imported names, so taken names from an outside source and brought them onto your list. You want to go back and send a message to those people and make sure that they do in fact still desire to be a part of your list. In addition to that, you want to feature your identity, your contact information on all of your electronic messaging, as we mentioned before, and include really those multiple paths that are very clear and easy to access for that subscriber to remove themselves from the list, to become unsubscribed. So really the question that we have for you this morning is, are you confident that your office is in compliance with these new spam laws? If you have questions, we welcome you to reach out to us by email. The address is there on your screen. Or of course, welcome you to find us and follow us on Facebook. Have a great day and good luck with your CASL compliance.